Hey, what's up, and welcome to this episode of Rainer on Leadership, a podcast for leadership within and outside of the church. My name is Josh.
My name is Sam, and we're going to tell you what it means to reach young families today.
Yeah, and if you're watching online, if you watch our YouTube channel, first of all, thank you so much for watching our YouTube channel. And yes, Sam and I have been wearing the same outfit for the last month. So, yes. If that's what you're curious about, this is the same shirt I've had on for a month.
In this case, in this series of episodes, whether on the podcast or on YouTube, we recorded 4. Typically, we do back to back. We do kind of do 2 at a time, and that's kind of where we land. So if you've noticed the pattern, like every other episode, they change shirts. Or every 2 episodes, they wear the same shirt. And there's a reason for that. And you're wearing a green shade, and I'm wearing a green shade. So if you, we look like we coordinated this.
Is your shirt, is it Built? Do you know the brand? Because it looks kind of like Built. I was going to ask you that.
No, actually, I like this particular polo is a James Purse, and that's kind of the brand that I go to. For those of you,
is a Built, and I really like it.
Okay, so for those who know clothing, I am a bit of a what is it, sartorial? I'm kind of into that whole thing, menswear.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, well, I buy most of my clothes used off eBay, just in case you want to see. The people go, "Oh, James Purse, oh, that's a nice shirt." Yeah, it is, but I buy them used off eBay, 10 cents on the dollar. There you go.
Ooh, very nice. I wasn't judging. It looks good.
No, I listen. I like shoes. I like watches. I'm kind of into all that stuff. But I do buy my stuff used off eBay. So there you go.
Yeah.
It means nothing, but what does mean something is our sponsor. That's right. I'm just bad at segues. Thank you, listeners, for bearing with me through all of my awful segues. Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, this great institution that is in Louisville, Kentucky, has a wonderful Doctor of Ministry program. It's strongly based in research and theology, as you would expect with the premier institution that Southern is, but also very practical, and they can give you the solutions that you need for your church. So the way you learn about them is at sbts.edu/solutions. Again, sbts.edu/solutions. This can be an extension of your current ministry and not a distraction. I love that. That's a good way to think about it. Hey, is this educational endeavor going to be a distraction? Nope, it's going to be an extension. So go check them out. Link in the show notes, sbts.edu/solutions. All right, Josh King. This is what every church wants, right? How do I reach young families?
Yeah, it's hard.
It is. So
really hard. Yeah.
10 years in at West Bradenton. 10 years. And it really wasn't until right after COVID when our ratios started changing dramatically. And we kind of ripped the Band-Aid off during COVID, as a lot of churches did. We made a lot of changes, regathered with like half of what was before, but we were significantly younger. So I knew that the trend was good, and I knew that if it was going to continue, that we would do well with it. But it was a Band-Aid that got ripped off. Not every church has that opportunity. Not every church can do that. So let's start with the metric of success. 25%. That's the metric that's when have we reached a large number of young families? When 25% of the Sunday morning attendance is 18 and under. That's when you know, okay, we're in a place where we can say we've really reached the next generation.
Yeah, and that's important to notice, because sometimes the churches that make all the headlines, the churches that really, their pastors are speaking at all the events, those sort of things. You look at they're like overwhelmingly young. Like 90% of their church is under the age of 30, something like that. And really sober-minded thinking about that, that's not healthy. And in fact, if you talk to the pastors or the elders of those congregations, they'll say, yeah, this is not good. This is not sustainable. It looks fun. There's a lot of excitement, but it's not sustainable. It's not a good number there. But I will say, just to say why this is so hard is it's the same as any demographic shift. If you think about, like, if you're a predominantly white church and you're trying to reach more, let's say, black people or something like that, you have conversations with that, and you'll talk to a black family that visits, and they'll be like, "Yeah, we love your church. We just want more black people there for us to go there." And I completely understand that. I think if you flipped the races, that kind of thing would happen as well. This is one of those really hard things. Young people want other young people at the church, and until some young people hang around, there's not going to be any young people. So it's a very hard thing to do. So if you're wrestling with this, just know hard is part of it. All right, just it's part of this whole deal. But good job wrestling with it.
Yeah, and it did take us years at West Bradenton. It was an older church when I got here. We did have a children's ministry, thankfully, and it was very well run. Jenny was running it. She's actually been on the show before. Think the world of her. But we just didn't have the momentum. And if you've got zero, right, that's the hardest place to start. And you say, what do you do? Well, you try to see if you've got 60, 70 people in your church, they're all older, man, start with your kids and grandkids. Like, and you know, that's the starting point, and you may get some dead ends there, but that's a good place to start.
I've got a theory though, and this will be, introducing it to the world. So you can shoot me down, Sam, if you think this. I actually think downfilling is a little bit easier to do. So, like, let's say your whole church they're all 70s. Let's just say that. I think it's actually easier to then try to reach 60s and 50s and get that ministry really going, and then reach 30s and 40s, and then get that really rolling, and to reach down, because that gap there, and this is just the way my theory is working here, my gap there is that you can cross a lot of that, and a lot of the things are going to be stronger as you fill down. Now, you want to, I almost say, like, put your emphasis on what I'm calling fill down, and then also simultaneously start to work those children's ministry angles there. So you're going to kind of build up towards the middle. But I'm working on a theory here at this church, and it is actually showing some fruit of just don't try to be so young so fast, get younger. So I don't know. Sam, is that a crazy idea? Or?
No, it's not. Particularly if you're a median-sized church, if you're 60, 70 people, I actually think that's a very good approach, a very reasonable approach. Most of these transitions take years. I mean, it's years. You hear these stories of, like, yeah, a pastor came in and 3 months later they had, hundreds of young people. That can happen. It's very rare and often exaggerated. Okay, so just know that these stories that you hear are often hyperbolic. And I say that as somebody who often uses hyperbole as a rhetorical device.
Who loves hyperbole?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite rhetorical devices. But I love the idea of reaching down, as you said, and kind of getting younger 10 years at a time. That makes a lot of sense. It's a slow go sort of thing, certainly. I still think that there's validity to, hey, grandparents, do you have any kids and grandkids? You get, let's say 4 of your families, so or 5 or 6. So you've got 3 sets of grandparents that have multiple children, multiple sets of grandkids. And you get like 3 or 4 or 5 families to go, you know what, we'll go to church with grandma and grandpa. And they each have, 3 or 4 or 5 families, they each have 2 or 3 kids. Like, all of a sudden, you've got 10 or 15 kids in your church, right? Now, I understand, like, well, that sounds very ideal. I've actually talked to these families, and their kids just don't go here anymore for various reasons. Well, I mean, maybe there's a way to bring them back by saying, hey, we're going to do something different, and we need you to help get it started. That can work, but I also think that you could do both, what I'm saying and what you're saying, at the same time. Frankly, churches that reach outward and actually just do the work of evangelism and actually invite people to church, people come. Right. Yeah. So the biggest hurdle is not like, what strategy are you using to reach young people? It's like, are you just inviting anybody? Are you sharing your faith with anyone? Because if you start doing that, you're going to have some church growth.
Yeah, exactly right.
But let's talk about investment. So let's say this starts working. Let's say, okay, we're actually seeing some young people come to the church, or we're a church that already has, a decent segment of young people. Again, we're talking 18 and under. This is how so 25% is where I kind of target 25% of the church needs to be 18 and under. We're right around 30% at my church, and we're already seeing some like problems with that because like just volunteers, just getting with the pool is only so big with people who can potentially volunteer. But what do we invest? So you take the children's ministry budget and the student ministry budget, and you combine them to get a number, and that number should be more than the worship ministry budget. So how do I know I'm like investing enough in the next generation? Take the worship ministry budget, which is the reason I use that is because it's often one of the larger pieces of the church budget, particularly in a 500,000 and annual budget plus church. The worship budget is often a certain size. Do not steal from your worship pastor. Don't do that. That's wrong. I'm not saying to reduce.
They don't like that.
Yeah, don't reduce the worship budget. But you take your children's ministry budget and your student ministry budget, and you should be able to combine them, and it should be larger than the worship ministry budget. That's a metric that I'm looking for when I'm doing consultations to go, hey, you're under investing in the next generation. It's not that you're over investing in worship; it's that you're under investing in the 18 and under category.
Yeah, I mean it's just a simple rule. You're going to get yields on what you invest in, and if you're not investing in it, you will have no yields. So it's very, very makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I've seen churches that have a full-time worship pastor, good for them, and a part-time assistant, plus this massive budget, and they're like, why don't we have more children? I'm like, you have one part-time person dedicated to students and children and almost no budget. So what did you think you would get?
You're getting exactly what you paid for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another thing that young families are looking for are very clear policies and procedures that prioritize child safety. This is a question that's actually coming up more and more. It's not that every parent is asking this. I think every parent is likely thinking it, but I am hearing more and more, not just in my own church, but other churches as well that we consult, that one of the things that parents ask on the front end is, hey, what are your safety procedures? Like what policies do you have in place? How do you vet volunteers? I may not quite ask it in those ways. Those are kind of like leadership ways of saying it, but you get new people to the church and they're going to be like, how do I know my kid's safe? Well, this is this is your opportunity to say, well, actually, here's our process. And it's a very good process. Nothing's foolproof, but this is what we do.
Yeah, and you're going to invite more questions if you're like check-in policies very lax. I talked to somebody the other day. Oh man, I think it was a person here, but they were telling about a church that they had gone to, and they went to go get their kid after the worship service, and they said, "Oh, he already left. They just let the kid go." And this was the first time they were ever at this church. And so she said, "So I didn't go back." She's like, "I liked the church, but I'm now recalling exactly what it is. And no, I'm not going to say the name of the church right now. But yeah, they just let the kid go. And so she's like, "Yeah, I'm not going back to that place." So that's something.
Nor should you.
Right. So that was something that stuck with her mind. And so if you do stuff like that, like they're going to ask more questions and more questions. And you do really need to be able to say, yeah, we at least background check everybody. We also have this training, which is free and online. Any church can get it. We have this and we have that. So there's a number of things that you need to be doing, checking those boxes.
So start times is another thing to consider. Our 9:30 service is more popular with parents of younger kids, elementary age. Our 11 o'clock service is more popular with parents of older kids, like teenagers. So we do the flip-flop thing, dual hours, full programming at 9:30 and 11. We also have an 8 o'clock traditional service. We don't do children's programming for that. But that 9:30 and 11 hour, it has a different crowd to it. It has a different feel. The 9:30 hour is actually like a younger crowd. The younger kids tend to go there because nap time is a real thing. Like kids get antsy, and parents prefer that. 11 used to be the sacred hour. 11 used to be the most popular hour. I'd say 9:30 or 10 is more popular now.
Yeah, I love a 9:30 worship service. I just think it fits our culture right now. In my previous church, we had a 9:30 and 11, and we added an 8, but we also added children's ministry to it. And that became extremely popular with our youngest families because those little boogers are already up. Those things got up at 6:30 because they've been getting up at 6:30 all week, and so they don't care that it's Sunday. They're not trying to sleep in. And so a lot of those families were like, I love the earlier hour. We're already up. We get ready, we go to church, and then we've got like, in our church, you'd go to small group after that, and then we've got the rest of the day. And we could take a nap, go to lunch, and still have the rest of the day. So think through those things. A lot of times we think 8 o'clock is like the old folk service. That's what some people think. It could be, if it's done in a certain way, those earlier hours actually benefit young families.
Age-segmented ministries is also a key here, and I understand that this can be controversial in certain circles, but my job is not to tell you what your convictions are, but to relay facts. So if you are convicted, if you are convicted about this, and you want all the kids in the service together, hey, good for you. I would not come to your church. There is no way. Now maybe my kids are a little older; they could stand that. Like, okay, but when they were young. No way. Age segmentation is what most families prefer. It's what I think is best for the church. Again, you may think differently, but when it's like, hey, we do children's ministry up to like 3-year-olds or 4-year-olds, and then they're in the service, that's a very niche sort of group, a very different sort of family. And if it works for you, great. It does not work for the majority of families. They like the discipleship programs for children, for students, for adults. The life stage issues of a 5-year-old is very different than the life stage issues of an 85-year-old. And I don't care if you're the greatest preacher on the planet, relating to both at the same time, all the time, for every sermon is very hard. So age segmentation does have its place in the church. It can be overdone where there's silos. I'm not talking about silos. I'm talking about segmentation with age-specific training for discipleship. I think that's the best way to go, and I think that that's what most families are looking for.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I think that, if a good median line is maybe kindergarten or first grade, about that time where they do go to school and they sit for a period of time in a classroom setting, which is typically first grade. That's a good time to say, at that point, we do invite them into worship service. They have an activity sheet. They're going to go along with it, remembering that like half of it is singing and they're standing, and so there's some movement involved in that. There's another half where they're set and they are expected to behave and decorum for the church, those kind of things. So I see that. I think I see other churches that go all the way up to maybe all of elementary is out, and then at junior high they come into the worship service. Personal preference, I think once it got past that level, I would probably not attend that church. I wouldn't go to one that has no childcare, but I also wouldn't want to go to one where like high school and down are never in the worship service with me. As a parent, I wouldn't prefer that. So I really don't understand why some churches feel like it's all or nothing. I think there's a couple of stages in there where you can really kind of, and I find that most parents really kind of like that. Some early elementary line is where they like to kind of go ahead and be.
Yeah, we offer programming for kids up to 5th grade during the worship hour. And we tell parents as we're discipling them, if you've been in our church your whole life and your whole family's believers, you're transitioning your kids to the worship service, right around 3rd or 4th grade. It's pretty typical for us at West Bradenton. Some kids are ready earlier than others, of course. But we work with the families to kind of transition them into the worship service, but we do program for up to 5th grade. So one of the things, in doing so, because we do have a lot of kids in the service as a result, like we have some 1st and 2nd graders in there that do great. They're ready for it. But what we've done is we do the sermon first, and then the music last. So if the kids get antsy near the end, well, that's during the music time. So when you put a lot of music up front and then do the sermon at the end, and you've got a lot of kids in there, if your service runs an hour 15, like ours does, about an hour 5, even the best kid's going to get a little antsy after about, 45, 50 minutes, really. It's a lot before then. So we flip-flop the music, and we do way more at the end. It allows for a longer response time too. My altar call, man, it can go 20 minutes, 30 minutes because of that. So our people tend to like it. That's a little tip for you guys that are out there that I want more kids in the service. Put the music at the end instead of the front. Lastly, worship styles, preaching philosophy, and specific programs like, you know the names of the programs. Those can be, they're important, but are often less important overall with young families making a decision. So just because you preach book, only do book studies, right? Only do verse by verse exposition. We only do this particular children's program. We have this very specific worship style. Like, they're important, and they can be helpful or detrimental to some degree. But by and large, why people come to church, we've done this research over and over again at Church Answers, is somebody invited them. They knew somebody there. They got connected.
Yeah, and
it's just that simple.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. A lot of that stuff, that loyalty to a certain program or that loyalty to a preaching style or those kinds of, that's stuff that insiders get indoctrinated on and then become loyal to. But when people are going from church to church, there's sort of an assumption it's like, it's going to be different. I just got to kind of figure out the code. And so, yeah, this church over here has this children's program, like let's say Awana, for instance, and I liked it. And I'm going to this church and I'm like, my previous church had Awana. Do you have some? And they'll be like, yeah, we have blah, 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 blah. That's this program, and it's totally different. And the people are like, oh, okay, cool. Like, they don't care. They're just like saying, I liked something for my kid. That whole like, we're this way and this way and this way. Most people transitioning churches, they're not going to care. Now, we're not saying no one cares. There are people that look for specifically those programs, and great. But I just don't think you need to bank everything on that.
Good word, good episode. Thank you, Dr. Josh King. We're right up against time, and I certainly want to share with everyone about our sponsor church teams. They have the system you need to get your church in great working order. They have all sorts of integrations for you to help you connect the dots of technology, and it's really easy to use. They've got a great interface that gets rave reviews, and they've got a reporting system that works well. So whether it's just, hey, we need help with text communication to our church, or a website, or workflows, or online giving, they do it all, and their pricing is scalable to church size. So you smaller churches can afford it, and you larger churches have what you need. The way you learn about church teams is at go.churchteams.com. Again, go.churchteams.com.
Yep. Make sure you check out Church Teams and Southern Seminary. We appreciate both of our sponsors. We also appreciate you, the listener. We hope that this episode is, beneficial to you, and that your church will begin to grow in young adults and young families and senior adults and median adults and everybody in between as you reach your community for Jesus. Y'all have a great week, and we'll catch you next time.